Welcome to Amtgard Leadership University Spotlight Interview Series. In this episode of the Spotlight Series, we're going to be sitting down with the Principality of Northreach, specifically Gorin, the first Prince of Northreach, and Hadelind, his successor, the second and current Princess of Northreach. I really appreciate you both taking some time with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having us here.
So, Gorin, says here you're your first Prince of Northreach. You mind sharing us a little bit of the history here, the Principality in Alaska?
Sure. So we've had Amtgard in Alaska since summer of 2000 when Astral Winds was formed up in Fairbanks, Alaska. For those that aren't familiar with the geography of Alaska, it's way up in the north and a very isolated community. It's about 6 hours from any other cities. So Amtgard flourished up there pretty well. It had a really strong duchy after just a couple of years, and it sort of stayed that way for about 8 years. After about 8 years, myself and a couple other people put together a project we called the AAEI, or the Alaskan Amtgard Expansion Initiative, and we put together some PowerPoint presentations and got some town hall meetings together and said, hey, if we want Amtgard to expand in the state, we need to put together a plan. So we put together a plan, and it took us several tries to actually get a park going in another city, which was in Anchorage. It took 3 tries, so there's been 3 parks in Anchorage before Lupin Moon, which is the current park, was able to firmly establish itself. And they did that in 2010. Since then, Amtgard has seen pretty rapid and explosive growth because there are now 6 chapters across the state, ranging from Homer, Alaska, way down on the Kenai Peninsula, all the way up to Fairbanks, and there's one also in North Pole, Aurora Grove.
Okay, and that brings us to current state, right?
More or less, yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about, you guys you're pretty well organized up here. Got a pretty strong and obviously successful business model, or else it wouldn't be blooming like it is. So what I'd like to just talk about is maybe some of your best practices, things you want to share with the rest of Amtgard, and then Princess Hadelind, I'll probably wrap some things up with just some current state and really what your plans are for the next couple months. So last couple of days, one of the big things we talked about is it takes money to play Amtgard in Alaska.
It does. It's not cheap.
No. I believe you're talking about how you have event costs and everything for the different gyms that you guys are using. Mm-hmm. So you're using Square to do a lot of your accounting. Princess Hadelind, you mind sharing a little bit about that, how you guys are implementing it?
Sure. So when the Principality was first formed, I was also our first Principality Prime Minister. And so a lot of the financial practices that we have in place, I had a hand in developing. One of the first things that we established when we formed as a Principality was standard money handling practices across the Principality. At the time, we had 4 parks? Mm-hmm. 4 parks. And with a lot of miles separating us. And so coming up with ways to track our money consistently from reign to reign and from park to park was challenging. And we implemented the usage of Square as one of the ways to help us have good controls over our money. Additionally, it also brought the convenience, of course, of being able to accept credit cards. And that brought a lot of convenience to our members. When we first implemented it, we we worked with each of the parks to decide how they wanted to handle the fees, because, of course, taking credit cards isn't free. And some of the parks decided to add those fees on to the prices that their members paid. And some of the parks decided that the convenience of having an easy way for their members to pay was worth sort of swallowing up those costs. I think overall, the parks have found that the convenience is worth the credit card fees, and very few of our parks now pass that fee on to the membership. But they handle that on a park-by-park basis with what their membership is comfortable with.
Okay. I want to make sure that I clear up any confusion. We talked about the event fees and things like that. Do you mind just walking through that a little bit on why you all have to charge
Sure.
for rental space?
Yeah. So anybody who's played in the cold understands how uncomfortable it becomes when you are playing Amtgard in 10 degrees. Well,
Or negative 40.
right. Yeah. When you get up to Fairbanks, and even here in Anchorage, you're talking temperatures in the wintertime of 20 to 40 below for weeks at a time. It's not really feasible to play Amtgard outside in those temperatures. So out of necessity, we have to play indoors. It's very challenging to find free space to play indoors. And even if you find free space, it's often not quality space where you get a really good battle game experience. So, for instance, here in Anchorage, the local park Loop and Moon often plays on a full football field inside AstroTurf. It's a great time, but it is $95 an hour. When you have 60 people showing up, it doesn't take very much money for each person to chip in to offset those fees and make playing in that incredible space possible. It really improves the quality of the game every weekend for all involved. And there are a couple parks who've managed to find very inexpensive indoor locations, but it's a trade-off. You spend less money, but you have a much smaller space, and you're sort of limited on which games you can play then.
Okay, great. Thank you for the detailed explanation. It sort of dawned on me while we were talking, the maroon and gray, obviously the last couple of panels and stuff like that, it showed up. But Gorin, we saw it an awful lot during the Dungeon Crawl event.
Yeah.
Land garb, it was all over the place. You'd have thought it was a company. Why are you guys so hardcore about it?
We don't have much of a company-based environment up here. As leaders, we stress more, patriotism towards your parks, and we try to get people to focus more on the organization itself rather than on a private club within the organization. And we found that mentality is helped us to be tremendously successful. So not only do you see a lot of the maroon and gray, which is the Principalities colors, but you see a lot of people wearing their individual park colors, and that's pretty common. And the folks here get really, really patriotic about their parks.
Great, that's great to hear. Now, Princess Hadelind, the other day I had an opportunity to sit in on your council's meeting. Mm-hmm. Do you mind elaborating on the meeting you held?
Sure. So we have a lot of meetings, and most of them are very formalized. I believe the one that you're referring to was every 6 months at the beginning of each reign, the officers from all of the parks around the Principality, we all get together and have a very formalized leaders summit. In this meeting, we sort of play around with our small groups, if you will, because we have communication and tight-knit working relationships with not just our local park leaders, but also the people across the Principality that are in our same positions. For instance, I am the monarch, and of course each park has their own monarch, but we all get together every 2 weeks via Mumble and discuss issues across the Principality within our park, make plans for the coming reign, and make sure that we're all on track, and use each other as support for anything that might come up. So we start to form those relationships in the first meeting of the reign, to meet the other people in our council, to work with them, and to start planning for the next 6 months in a very formalized manner.
Okay. Gorin, she mentioned the various groups and different leaders getting together and whatnot. Sounds obviously like she was referring to your Council of Monarchs and your various councils. Can you walk us through the 5 various councils that you all have?
Absolutely. So most people are familiar with the officers of the park. We refer to those as the top 5 officers, and you have your monarch, your champion, your regent, your prime minister, and your guildmaster of reeves. Well, we have 6 parks plus the principality, so there's 7 of each of those officers. You have 7 champions, 7 monarchs, etc. Each of those individual officers are part of a council with all of the other officers of the same position. So all of our monarchs get together and form our Council of Crowns. And they essentially are the executive body for the organization. The regents form the Council of Regents. The prime ministers form the Chancellor's Council. The champions form the Council of War. And the guildmasters of Reeves form the Reeves Council. And each of those councils are tasked with doing specific things across the principality. For example, the Reeves Council is tasked with creating a unified Reeves test for the entire principality, which creates a really solid document that's been it's been looked over by multiple GMRs, and they've all come to a consensus, and means that any member from any one of our parks can take a Reeves test in any park, and they're taking the same quality of test and being qualified for office there, or to be Reeves certified.
Okay. Princess Hadelind, do you mind just sharing what are some of the other requirements or the tasks that were given up for the other councils?
Sure. So we have a fairly clearly defined sort of roles within our corpora on areas that each office is responsible for. Additionally, of course, each reign we have particular projects that we're working on. One of the things that is an overall theme between each of the councils is working to bring consistency across practices across all the parks, and then also unifying all of the parks together so that we're moving forward in the same direction, all striving towards the same goals. But then specifically, our regents are working on ANS judging certification, which helps us, of course, in any ANS competition that we have to ensure that we have qualified and knowledgeable judges that consistently score on the same scale across competition. They're also working on our ANS online university, which is a sort of repository of tutorials and knowledge articles on anything ANS related that's available to new members, to veteran members, to members of other principalities and kingdoms. And they're also working on a crown qualification standardization so that there's a sort of a manual of if you are a brand new person who needs to be autocrating a crown quals, you can open up the book. You could say, okay, I need index cards. This is my timeline. This is how I announce things. This is how I select judges. So it's a very clear process that can be repeated across any park by just about any member.
Okay. Gorin, you all seem to have adopted IT as just a pretty strong tool, whether it's using Square, it's using Mumble for your meetings. Are there some other examples that you guys have adopted IT to further the game?
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit earlier is, for those that aren't familiar with our structure, I guess, our organization is one organization. Legally, we have one NPO, and that actually covers all of the parks. So, we utilize online banking, which allows us to move money, back and forth between the parks and the principality or wherever it needs to go, through online services. We use a message board for all of our official communications. Like you said, you mentioned Mumble, which we use for all of our meetings, simply because we're spread out over, what is the distance between the farthest parks?
It's like 550
miles. 550 miles from one end of the principality to the other. So so meeting regularly is pretty difficult for everybody. So we do that online through Mumble, which works really well. What other IT resources do we use?
We have started the process of utilizing Zero
for our accounting.
An accounting software to continue the standardization of all of our financial dealings.
And we have our own YouTube channel and things like that too. So
okay, great, thank you for that. So let's stick with computers for a minute. Gorin, standardized use of social media. So I believe Princess Hadelind mentioned it to me earlier today. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys have standardized it and why?
Well, we have a Facebook page for each of our regions and one for the principality. We don't have any social media outside of that.
No, although, if you don't mind, we also have standardized communication channels through Facebook for officers of the individual parks.
Sure.
So each park actually has 2 Facebook groups. They have the public Facebook group, which is available for all members, and non-members can view all of that information. So that's how we get the word out, if you will, and encourage communication between members. Then additionally, each park has a private Facebook group for officers, which is intended to be a way to capture official communication for official park business that needs to happen quickly between a group of officers. It's also a great way that I stay connected to what the officers in each park are up to, just as the business of running a park goes on. So if there's anything that comes up and they can ping me really quickly, I can be cued into what's going on, what type of assistance they need, what type of blocking issues I can help them resolve. And then, of course, all of the official record is the forums. So any communication that's happening on Facebook, it all gets transferred over to the forums so that we have that long-term official record that we own, because, of course, you don't really own it once it's on Facebook. So we encourage that for quick communication to make sure that everybody's up to date on things, and then the archiving happens on the forums.
Okay, thank you for that. So the last benchmark that I wanted to talk about was raised during the Dungeon Crawl panels, and we've talked about it briefly before, but Amtgard. I guess it sort of started out as just a bunch of people getting together, but it sounds like you guys have actually adopted it as a formal practice. Gorin, can you
it is
that for me?
You know, I travel around the country a lot, and as a Crown Knight, when I go to places where there are, sort of more fringe Amtgard, they don't have a lot of knights and stuff, they'll ask me a lot of questions on, how can they grow their park, or how can they retain more members? And as I tell them always to start with this particular activity. So we engage in something called Amtgard. And that is like literally a formal event where after Amtgard, we all go somewhere. Usually it's a restaurant. We have dinner, drinks, whatever, and just sort of hang out. And when you apply that consistently, when all of your officers, make that part of their day and go, the membership comes along, and it changes Amtgard from, a couple hours of fighting to really an all day long activity with a lot of social components as well as the fighting components. So like in our Anchorage group, Loop and Moon, in the summertime, Amtgard starts at noon. Battle games go until about 6 o'clock. Then everybody goes to Denny's, and we'll still be there at like 8:30 at night, and there'll be 45, 50 people in there. They give us the whole banquet room. And it's a really, really great winding down environment. Any negativity that may have occurred in the field, people getting a little hot under the collar or whatever, they tend to be able to work that out pretty quickly by just sitting down and being part of a social environment afterwards. So people tend to end the day on a really positive social note, which I think is really important for building the community aspect of Amtgard, which is the only way to grow.
One other thing just popped in mind, especially when you're starting the timeline and things like that. Do you guys stick to a pretty rigid schedule for your days?
I do. Yes, I mean, we try to. Even our most unorganized chapters are probably more organized than the average Amtgard chapter, in my experience anyway. For example, across the Principality, our Council of War, our champions, they generally will post all of the battle games that are going to be played on Saturday no later than 5 p.m. on Wednesday. So Wednesday afternoon, you'll see posts all over the Principality of what games are going to be played when. And that includes a timeline. Like, we're going to start right at noon, 12:05, first lay on is going to be called, and we'll stage out the day from there. So we try really hard to get our members accustomed to the idea that they can depend on our start time. We do everything we can to steer away from the concept of Amtgard standard time, because if people can't expect things to be happening when they show up, they're less likely to show up. So if they can depend that at 12:05, this is when stuff's going to start, they'll be there. And if you get 50 people doing that, then they're more likely to keep coming back out.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Princess Hadelind, sounds like Gorin passed a pretty successful organization over to you.
Yes.
And you guys have been building on from that. What's the future at Northreach look like under the rest of your reign?
So I'm halfway through at this point in time. I have 6 more months.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
Because we didn't talk about that.
Right.
How long are you in office in the principality here?
Yeah, principality offices are year-long terms. And that was a very conscious decision that we made at the formation of the principality to ensure continuity so that a lot of projects that you want to have happen on a statewide level, principality-wide level, they're really difficult to get going, get planned, get momentum, and get finalized in 6 months. And so we felt that the officers who were willing to step into the principality level offices were probably going to be willing to do it for a year to ensure that the projects that they were starting could be seen to fruition. So
I'm going to touch on that if you don't mind. One of the things it's important to understand about our structure too is that our principality officers don't directly oversee a park.
Right.
So they don't have day-to-day things to do like a local monarch would. What that does is it sort of frees them up to look at long-term projects. And it's kind of environmental for us because Amtgard has a Alaska has a very clear on and off season. You know, we have 2 seasons, which are winter and construction. And so everything that we do in the spring and summer is just run execution of all of the events. So having year-long terms allows, you know, the quieter times of the winter to be used to prepare and plan so that when it comes to execute, you can do that. Trying to hand that off to somebody halfway through, we just decided was not the most efficient way to do that. That probably applies to just about everywhere else. I know that, you know, there's a huge difference in most kingdoms between the summer rain and winter rain as far as level of activity and stuff. So we've found a lot of success in allowing our statewide officers the time to have a 12-month plan, essentially.
Great. Okay. Sorry, I derailed the question there, but so you're halfway through, which is where most people start. So you got 6 months to go.
Right.
What's the next 6 months look like for Northreach?
So luckily, because I've had 6 months in the position, I've got some pretty good plans in place. A lot of momentum has already been built. We're sort of heading into heading away from the planning and into the lots of doing. So we have a lot of events that are coming up for the rest of the summer. We will have a large contingency in attendance at Clan, and where the goal is to present our kingdom pre-bid, which is very exciting for us. And we have a lot of people working towards that, a large group of people who are actively involved in that. And then we get back from Clan, and then we have our large summer event, Wolf's Cry, which we usually have about 120 people in attendance there. We do it at the state fairgrounds. Awesome event.
This year's Live for Your Cry Hard, right?
Live for your cry hard. And then directly after that, we will be launching into our second time at the Alaska State Fair. And so those 3 events happen in very rapid succession. And so the months preceding that will be all sorts of planning and preparation to be able to pull off those 3 very large events with very little time in between each one of them.
But definitely sounds like like it's going to be busy during, as Gorin put it, construction season.
Yes.
Construction season.
So, Gorin, any last thoughts or footstops before we wrap things up?
Oh, that's tough. There's a lot of stuff that we could talk about. No, I mean, there's the way that Amtgard's been run. Hi, kitty. Over the years it's interesting that the way that the obstacles that we've run into based on, you know, corpora structures that were written 20 years ago by folks that really weren't into, I don't know, corporate structure. We've run into a lot of obstacles with that when it comes to trying to run a cohesive organization over a large geographic area. But we found a lot of success in this model, and I would recommend it to any principality, confederation, or kingdom that was interested in having some really solid growth of their organization, and especially financially. Some of the things that we've managed to accomplish is just pretty incredible. Like we've been in a principality for 2 years now. And when we started the principality, the coffers had $50 in them. You know, and in the Principality coffers. Since then, I mean, we've generated, gosh, I mean, I don't know, maybe $12,000 in external fundraising, and tens and tens of $1,000s of internal fundraising. Right. Just for example, through our Square store, you know, we had our summer event Wolf's Cry a couple years ago, and I wanted to build a castle for it. Put together a plan. I figured it would cost about $1,500. And I just put on our web store, you can donate to the castle here. And if you do, I'll make you a cool plaque. You can be a sponsor for life. But we only had about 2 months to put it together. And in 6 weeks, I raised over $4,000 for members. Just, I mean, not huge donations, you know, $25 here, $30 there, whatever. But because it was so convenient and easy to run through, you know, an online web portal, our members were able to do it. And we didn't have to have prime ministers running around trying to collect cash and keep it in a shoebox, you know, like we did 15 years ago when we first started Amtgard. So if you have a group of officers who can sit and monitor and coordinate the entirety of the organization, you give them the time to do it and the tools with which to do it, you'll see some really transformative progress.
Princess Hadelind, how about you? Any last remaining thoughts? Or
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, I think that it's a best practice for us here in Northreach is bringing consistency to the Amtgard experience. So if you are interested in Amtgard in the state of Alaska and you go to Astral Winds in Fairbanks or you go to Frozen Coast in Kenai, you can know what you're going to get, which is really major when we're branding and marketing to potential new members. When we're at the Alaska State Fair, we have the potential of 300,000 touch points. That's the amount of people that come through the fair. That's major. And it's really important that when those new people are coming through and they're interested in this game, that we know what quality of experience we have available to them, regardless of where they're from. And I think that consistency is a huge strength to our organization and brings a lot of enjoyment to our members. And same with our members when they travel. They're not having to learn house rules or assimilate to a very different culture just because they traveled 2 hours. So that consistency, I think, is a huge strength and benefit.
Great. Well, on behalf of Amtgard Leadership University, we sure appreciate the two of you taking your time out to share a little bit behind the scenes, what makes Northreach tick and work as well as it does. Good luck at Clan with your pre-bid, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks a lot.